There's a level of mental toughness so quiet, it scares people because it never argues, never explains, and never stops. And today, you'll discover exactly how to get there. You've felt it, the early motivation, the perfect plan, and then the slow fade. Day 3 hurts, day 7 breaks you, day 10 is a ghost town. Yet some people keep going when everyone else disappears. What do they have that you don't? If you're serious about becoming unshakable, subscribe and comment the one habit you refuse to negotiate this month. Let's begin. David looked strong on paper. His calendar blocks were clean and color-coded, his goals written in capital letters across a whiteboard that reflected morning light like a polished promise. He had the quotes too, Stoics on suffering, Navy SEAL lines about embrace the suck, a pinned post about discipline on his phone. He would start at 6 a.m., he told himself, because that sounded like someone who had his life together. The night before, he set 3 alarms and put his running shoes by the door exactly the way a productivity book suggested. And for a while the first week, it worked. He showed up, he sweated, he posted a progress pic to a group chat, and the dopamine halo made the world look possible. Then came the 3rd morning, where most plans go to die. The snooze button wasn't a button, it was a negotiation table. His brain arrived with spreadsheets of reasons. You didn't sleep enough. The weather's not right. Your calves are sore. Missing once is smart recovery. You'll double tomorrow. He didn't decide to quit. He agreed to a temporary delay that kept renewing itself. At lunch, he felt the soft guilt of someone who knows the truth and refuses to say it out loud. By evening, he promised to reset on Monday, as if Monday were a moral detox. He repeated this loop in a dozen areas: work, language learning, writing, even calling family. The pattern wasn't laziness, it was identity leakage. He could be talked out of anything by the most persuasive person he knew: himself. He hated the silence between tasks, because that's where the negotiation got loudest. He filled the gaps with tiny hits: email refreshes, reels, snacks, research tabs multiplying like mirrors in a funhouse. He mistook movement for momentum and planning for progress. Each abandoned plan left a hairline crack in self-trust. Each crack made the next negotiation easier. When friends quit their goals, he understood. When he saw the rare person who didn't bend, he didn't understand at all. What did they have? Superhuman genes. Did they want it more? Why did their faces look boring when they worked, like nothing dramatic was happening, and yet they kept going long after everyone else had drifted away? The scariest part wasn't that he failed, it was that he was reliable in the wrong direction. If you asked whether David would negotiate with himself at the first sign of friction, you could bet money on it. He feared pain, yes, and boredom even more. But beneath both was something worse. He feared the version of himself that might exist if he stopped negotiating. He had a sense that person would change what he said yes to, what he tolerated, how he spent weekends, who he texted back, how he was perceived. And perception had been the invisible boss of his life. In quiet moments, the truth came like a sentence that didn't ask permission. You don't need a new plan. You need a new relationship with your word. He didn't find a new plan. He found a person. The mentor didn't look like a guru. No bracelets, no slogans, no sales pitch. "Show me your streaks," the mentor said. David opened his habit tracker, clinging to the green boxes like a certificate. The mentor nodded, unimpressed. "And show me your breaks." The red gaps told the real story, not of effort, but of what could stop him. "You think discipline is intensity," the mentor said. "It's honesty. Intensity is a mood. Honesty is a habit." He slid a single sheet of paper across the table. At the top, the EDGE protocol. 3 lines, almost insultingly simple. Voluntary friction. Introduce small, deliberate difficulty to train against comfort's gravity. Cold starts, phone outside, one-take drafts, stairs instead of elevator. The point is not pain, it's precision. He underlined a note. Friction is a lever to move identity, not a theater to impress yourself. Non-negotiable. Window, a daily time block. Short, same time, where the word later does not exist. Not a suggestion, not if I feel like it. This is a contract you sign with your future self. If life explodes, the window shrinks, but it still exists. Truth counting. Stop measuring minutes, calories, or pages. Start counting kept promises. Binary, kept equals 1, broke equals 0. The only line that matters is the longest unbroken chain of ones. You've been sprinting toward a finish line, the mentor said, but this requires a funeral. The part of you that bargains has to die, not once, daily. You don't kill him with motivational speeches. You starve him with consistency. He talked about the brain, not to impress, but to demystify. The limbic system can flood you with urges. The prefrontal cortex is your steward of plans. You won't out-argue urges, but you can make decisions once and enforce them with structure, putting obstacles between you and the easy path, removing obstacles between you and the hard one. Motivation is a spark, he said. Friction and windows are the fireplace. The mentor didn't ask David to believe anything. Test it. 14 days, no inspiration required. We'll talk in data, not drama. He took David's phone and placed it in a kitchen drawer. Begin with a 45-minute window at the same time each day. Name the window. Write the contract to yourself in one sentence, then shut up and keep it. On day 1, David wrote, "I keep my word to myself from 7 to 7:45 a.m., no matter how I feel." He set a manual timer because the analog click felt more honest than a slick app. He placed the phone outside the room, door closed, only the tools he needed on the desk. The first 5 minutes were awful. His body was there, his mind wasn't. Micro itches arrived in waves, the urge to check if anyone had messaged, the need to adjust his chair, the sudden memory of a bill he should pay. He noticed each itch, named it, and continued. At minute 12, his brain tried a different angle. You're ahead. You can finish early. At minute 21, slow day at work. You can extend this later. It'll be better then. The timer kept ticking without sympathy. When it rang, he had logged 45 uninterrupted minutes of doing exactly what he said he'd do. No fireworks, just relief, like a muscle unclenching. The negotiation didn't show up where he expected it. It arrived after the session, carrying a bouquet. You crushed it. Take tomorrow off as a reward. The compliment was the trap. He laughed at the thought and was startled by the sound. Laughing alone in a room felt like proof that a tiny war was already underway. Day 2 was uglier. A message from his manager landed early. A friend asked for a quick coffee. The building alarm test started mid-window with an indifferent blast. The urge to postpone felt rational, even responsible. He shrank the window to 25 minutes and sat down anyway. He practiced boredom on purpose, letting the desire to switch burn through without taking action, like standing on a beach and watching waves break. He added a breath cadence to cut the edge. Inhale, hold, slow release, repeat. Not mindfulness for calm, breath for control. The timer rang. 25 minutes counted as a 1. He wrote, "What tried to break me today?" and listed 3 things with no editorializing. After 4 days, a strange fatigue rolled in, not the tiredness of effort, but the soreness of withdrawal. He had been medicating discomfort with tiny escapes, and he was newly sober. His bargaining brain got creative. It offered hybrid solutions. You can keep the window but also keep your old habits. Maybe answer messages during it to be efficient. He recognized the move and declined to comment. He wasn't aiming for heroics. The target was brutal simplicity. Keep the window, count the truth. He realized the first victory wasn't the work itself. It was the absence of argument. The relief was physical, noticeable even in his shoulders. Decision fatigue had been evaporating him. A single daily contract functioned like a coat hook for his attention. Everything else hung more neatly. He systemized because he didn't trust motivation to visit every morning. He picked a single hard thing per season, one craft, one practice, so the window had a clear object. For him, it was deep work on a project that mattered, the kind he'd been postponing because it might reveal his limits. He wrote the steps on an index card the night before and put the card on the desk. Not a to-do list, a run sheet, open document, set timer, start at the next sentence. Do not revise first 10 minutes, 1 pass-through notes, close with 1 line of reflection. He designed his environment like a locksmith. Temptations were heavy and far, tools were light and near. He charged his phone in the kitchen and bought an old-school alarm clock. He placed a water bottle within reach and moved snacks out of sight. He used website blockers set to the window time with no override. He saved a document called Negotiate Here as a landing pad, a place to dump every anxious thought so it couldn't hijack his window. He called this friction architecture, not punishment, just physics. If the easy path got heavier, he'd stop sliding. He introduced the red line rule. You can't miss twice. Miss once? Life happens. Miss twice? That's a pattern. To prevent the second miss, he built contingency tiers. Tier A, the full 45-minute window at the usual time. Tier B, an emergency 25-minute window if the day collapses. Tier C, a 5-minute micro window done anywhere, bathroom stall, stairwell, car, only if the day is on fire. A Tier C counts as a 1 because the measurement is honesty, not volume. He wasn't optimizing for records, he was protecting identity. He shifted the metric from vanity to truth. His old trackers had been about how much, miles, pages, kilograms. The new ledger had one line, kept. He even stopped announcing wins to friends for a while. The social reward diluted the private contract. He kept a pen scratch chart on paper, a row of small boxes that he filled with a single dark stroke after each window. The uneven ink told a story screens could not. You either did it or you didn't. He learned not to celebrate in ways that weakened him. Finishing the window didn't earn a sugar reward or a 2-hour scroll. The window was normal, not special. He reserved celebration for streak integrity, a quiet nod at 7 days, a short walk without headphones at 14, a dinner alone at 21 where he wrote what was changing. He noticed that boredom turned from enemy to ally. Boredom meant the ritual was working. Work didn't need to feel dramatic. Drama had been the currency of the old negotiator. He discovered a few rules of thumb that saved him from himself. If the thought began with, "I'll do it later," he translated it, "I won't do it." If he caught himself rewriting the plan mid-window, he wrote the new idea in the Negotiate Here document and resumed the original plan without comment. If anxiety spiked, he worked smaller, 1 sentence, 1 rep, 1 paragraph. If he missed a morning, he didn't apologize to his future self. He paid his debt before bed. He started scheduling the window around his energy rather than his ego. 7 a.m. to 7:45 a.m. wasn't magic. It was when he was least interrupted and most honest. On days his sleep was fractured, he used Tier B without shame. On days he felt invincible, he didn't extend the window beyond the contract. He kept the quality tight and left wanting more. He learned that consistency is a fragile animal. Overfeeding it with hero days makes it skittish and likely to run. He layered in a practice the mentor called boredom mastery. Once a day, outside the window, he sat for 5 minutes with no phone, music, or input. He didn't call it meditation, he called it sitting it out. The goal was to rewire the association between discomfort and escape. The first week, the minutes felt like hours. By week 2, he could feel the countless tiny urges that once controlled him passing through like weather. He kept notes like a scientist instead of a poet. Day 6, urge to check email peaked at minute 9, declined by minute 14. Day 9, headache, Tier B, still 1. Patterns emerged. The urge to quit was loudest early and late, the middle was quiet. Hunger cues were often thirst. Anxiety about not enough time was a lie, the window always finished. He stopped trying to feel ready and started treating readiness as a myth. The mentor's words rang softer now, not as a speech, but as a description of what was already happening. You enforce identity with structure. The negotiator starves when there is nothing to negotiate. David noticed his evenings changing. He watched 1 show instead of 3. He answered fewer texts immediately. He left some messages unread without guilt. He went to bed earlier, not out of virtue, but because the morning had become a meeting with himself, and he didn't stand people up anymore. Friends asked what hack he'd discovered. He shrugged. There was no hack, just a funeral. He had stopped letting the soft version of himself run the meeting. The proof wasn't the output, though that was growing. It was the absence of a voice he used to hear all day, the one that always had a reason to start tomorrow. It arrived on a Tuesday, disguised as a normal day. The sun never quite woke up. The sky stayed the color of a dull knife. His inbox erupted before breakfast. Client escalation, misfiled documents, a meeting moved earlier without asking. Then the phone call about his father's blood pressure spiking, the sudden drive across town, the fluorescent hush of a clinic waiting room where time has no edges. Lunch was a granola bar he didn't remember eating. By evening, the apartment felt like a hotel room rented by a stranger. Somewhere inside that fog, the contract still existed, ink on paper, a window that had not happened. The old version of him had a script for days like this. It began with sympathy and ended with surrender. You don't owe anyone heroics. Be kind to yourself. Start fresh tomorrow. In fact, reset next week when life is calmer. He could feel that soft voice offering him a couch and a blanket. It sounded like love. It was camouflage. 11:42 p.m. He checked the clock and felt something like embarrassment. Not at the chaos of the day, but at the realization that he was moments away from breaking a promise in the only category he claimed to control. The red line rule rang out with the clarity of a bell. You can't miss twice. He didn't need a pep talk. He needed a door to close. He clicked the analog timer to 25 and set it on the desk like a witness. Phone in the kitchen, door shut, chair pulled in, the ritual compressed but intact. He didn't choose the perfect task. He chose the next sentence. The timer began to tick, indifferent. The first 5 minutes tasted like metal. His brain tried to bargain with emergency language. This is different. This is special. You deserve to rest. He treated the urges like weather. Name, note, no move. A breath cadence he'd practiced. Inhale, hold, slow, exhale. Stitched the minutes together, not to feel better, just to keep acting. The sound of the building's pipes clanged. A neighbor's laugh flashed through the wall. His spine protested the chair. He stayed. At minute 12, a more sophisticated argument appeared. You could stop at 15, call it a symbolic win. He smiled at the trick. Symbolic wins had filled his life with trophies that meant nothing. He worked smaller than his anxiety. 1 paragraph, 1 line, 1 revision. He wrote into the slope of fatigue instead of around it. By minute 21, something quiet switched on, a sensation neuroscientists sterilize into terms like top-down regulation, but that feels, in a human body, like the moment a horse recognizes the rider. Not domination, partnership. The timer rang at 12:07 a.m. 25 minutes became a 1. The number looked unglamorous and holy. He turned off the lamp and noticed that sleep came without negotiation, as if the brain, like any animal, relaxes more in the presence of a reliable shepherd. The weak didn't respect him for that choice. The world doesn't hand out medals for private integrity. The next day, fatigue dragged chains around his ankles. Mid-afternoon, an urgent request landed with a subject line that pulsed. A friend sent an article about burnout and added a concerned emoji, like a diagnosis. He felt the edges of resentment. Why do I have to be the one who never bends? Then he remembered. He wasn't playing a public game. He hadn't sworn off flexibility in life. He had sworn off flexibility with a single daily window. Everything else could fluctuate. The contract was the anchor. He triaged. Tier A wasn't possible. The morning window had been blown apart by appointments. He dropped to Tier B without ceremony. 25 minutes in a quiet conference room with the fluorescent lights off and the building's HVAC sighing. Someone jiggled the doorknob. He didn't answer. The timer clicked, and that was the answer. The next day, the fire alarm test returned like an indifferent god. He went to Tier C, standing in a stairwell with his notes on his knee, 5 minutes of concentrated work that felt like a thin thread saving a climber. 5 minutes counted as a 1 because the goal wasn't volume. It was truth. He wasn't feeding his ego. He was starving the negotiator. He noticed that emergencies had a predictable shape. The world shouted, and his attention ran toward the shouting. The window gave him a counter-move. Even when he couldn't choose the shape of the day, he could choose a small island where his word was law. He learned a trick from the mentor for nights when willpower felt like a punctured lung. Put your hand on the doorframe, say, "Begin," out loud, and sit before your brain submits its objections. The body is a lever. The mind often follows it. He started treating begin like flipping a breaker. Each time he did, the room brightened without asking permission from his feelings. The shift wasn't fireworks, it was geological. He woke one morning and realized that the window no longer needed a negotiation. The question had disappeared. He didn't think, will I do it? He thought, what will I do within it? People talk about identity as if it's elected. He was learning it's accrued like sediment by kept promises layered until they harden. What he used to call motivation was becoming something else, a groove cut deep enough that water prefers it. There were external changes, yes. He moved through meetings with fewer words and more weight. He didn't over-explain or anticipate imaginary objections. He replied slower and lost the itch to prove he was always available. He discovered the rare sentence, no, could be said without apology and that the people worth keeping adjusted. He expected boredom and found it friend-shaped, steady, undramatic, faithful. The real change, the scariest one, was internal silence. A voice he'd lived with for years, always opinionated, always soothing, always bribing him with later, had grown faint. When it spoke now, it sounded like a child asking for candy before dinner. He didn't scold it, he just served dinner. His brain felt different in ways he couldn't see but could sense. The first 5 minutes of the window, once a battlefield, now passed like a warm-up. The limbic alarm still rang sometimes, cravings, anxieties, but the prefrontal steward had trained itself to reach for the switch that dimmed them. He could practically feel the loop tightening. Cue, timer, routine, sit, breath, begin, reward, a box filled in, a body that trusted itself. He wasn't chasing dopamine spikes, he was building a home for it to visit at the same time each day. Predictability turned out to be a nicer drug than novelty. People asked for his system. He told them the 3 lines and watched their faces fall, the way faces fall when they hear there's no back door. He didn't mind. Systems that require applause tend to collapse when the room is empty. His life was squeezing out applause as a fuel source. He didn't delight in saying no to dinners or plans. He selected them like a craftsman selecting materials, fewer and better. The fear that discipline would shrink his life proved false. It was making room, less noise, more music. There were still hard days. A virus took his energy like a tax. Travel threatened to eat his morning. He did Tier C in an airport restroom, airplanes groaning, a child wailing, his timer balanced on the paper towel dispenser. The box still got a line. The chain lengthened while his pride stayed at the same size. He caught himself once wanting to post a humble brag, stairwell window, no excuses, and he didn't. Attention is a sugar that makes effort sick. He kept the sweetness private. At the end of 60 days, the mentor didn't offer a certificate. He asked a question, who did you become? David tried to answer with facts. The project had moved farther in 2 months than in the previous year. Sleep had stabilized. Anxiety, once the bass note under everything, had risen an octave, but none of those were the answer. He wrote a sentence in his notebook and underlined it twice. I am someone my future can trust. He decided to mark the death of the negotiator not with a party, but with a burial. He didn't invite anyone. No camera, no post. He chose a night the weather app called unfavorable, rain slanting, wind that turned umbrellas into skeletons. Midnight. He laced up shoes with wet fingers and stepped into air that bit. The route was plain, out to the river, across the old iron bridge, back through the industrial streets where the city keeps its lungs. He carried nothing but one rule. Don't stop moving forward. No watch, no pace, no soundtrack. The city's sounds, tires on water, a distant freight horn, a drunk laugh ricocheting off brick, composed their own rude symphony. At the first hill, his calves asked for a compromise. Walk this part, save your knees, be reasonable. He let the request pass without debate and shortened his stride. The rain drilled into his face. He swallowed it and kept going. Halfway across the bridge, wind shoved him sideways and his breath broke like a rope. He remembered something the mentor had said in a tone that made it sound like weather. The mind obeys the body that has been here before. The windows were miles, just invisible ones. His legs remembered the rules. 1 step, then 1 step, then 1 step. He thought about the version of himself who loved the drama of big nights. He'd engineered difficult things before, fasts, challenges, heroic sprints, but they always starred him. Tonight, he was scenery. He passed a woman under a bus shelter scrolling under a cone of light. A bar door opened and let out heat and a cheer. He didn't feel superior. He felt unremarkable in the most satisfying way, like a worker among workers. Rain jacket, task, finish line no one else could see. On the far side of the river, he turned beneath a billboard selling a dream that had never been offered honestly, effort-free transformation. He laughed, not unkindly, at how much of his life he'd spent trying to become the kind of person who didn't have to try. The wind ate the laugh. The street didn't care. Good. He ran by the factory where the night shift loaded pallets, men and women doing repetitive motions with more dignity than half the executives he knew. Unseen does not mean untrue. He filed the sentence away for later. The last mile hurt in the old, stupid way. Ankles complained. A seam in his sock rubbed raw. The negotiator made one final pitch, dressed as wisdom. Stopping now would prevent injury. Future, you would thank you. He felt the nostalgia of that tone, like an ex's cologne in an elevator. He didn't accelerate. He didn't snarl. He did the thing he'd taught himself to do every day, act without a conversation. Forward, forward, forward. He reached the apartment, soaked through and blinking water from his eyelashes. He didn't take a photo. He didn't check a step count. He toed off his shoes and watched mud fan across the mat. In the kitchen, he took out his notebook and wrote exactly one sentence. He didn't adorn it. He let the ink sit heavy in the paper. I keep my word when no one is watching. Then he drew a small square and filled it in, the same way he did every morning after the window. The square looked identical to all the others. That sameness felt like a cathedral. He slept with the easy arrogance of someone who didn't owe himself an explanation in the morning. The next day, rain gave way to a sky that could not decide between blue and grey. He made coffee, washed the mug, set the timer, and sat. There was no head rush, no chorus, just a human and a chair and a contract. The scary thing about that level of toughness, he realized, isn't that it roars, it's that it erases the need to roar. People around him felt it. They couldn't name it. They gave it nicknames: focus, drive, discipline. He returned to his work the way rivers return to the sea. No speech, no photograph, just gravity finally aligned with the shape of the earth. The mentor asked him weeks later whether he still feared becoming the person who didn't negotiate. I was afraid he'd make my life small, David said. He made it simple. He noticed that choices once sharp with anxiety now rounded off. He had traded infinite options for a few good ones. He had grown suspicious of the kind of brilliance that requires chaos to feel alive. He had learned to respect dull tools used every day. He bought a new pen when the old one ran out and didn't post about it. Sometimes he caught the negotiator's ghost at the edge of the room, making wild promises about tomorrow. The ghost had the decency now to whisper. David would nod at the air, grateful for the reminder that he had once been easily moved. Then he would look at the clock at 6:59, place his hand on the doorframe, say, "Begin," and take his seat. The timer would tick, the world would argue. He would keep his word. And in that small, terrifying quiet, the person he had buried would stay buried, and the person he had become would go on doing the least glamorous magic a human can do, becoming the kind of person who simply doesn't stop. If something in you went quiet while you watched this, not hyped, just honest, that's the part that's done negotiating. Protect it. Give it a single sentence and a time on the clock, and let your life feel simpler than your excuses. If this spoke to you, subscribe so we can keep building that quiet strength together. Then declare your 7-day promise in the comments. One clear line, present tense. I keep my word from start time to end time every day for 7 days. Write it, post it, and make it real. If you know someone who needs this, send it to them and start together tomorrow. Remember, the scariest level of toughness isn't loud. It's the calm of a person who keeps their word when no one is watching. I'm proud of you for choosing that path. See you in the next video.